Welcome to Danny's podcast.
This is the Redefining Plastics podcast. Justin Riney. Welcome to the Redefining Plastics podcast. My name is Justin Riney. Very excited today. Got a group of folks I've been working with now for quite a while. We've been working quite diligently to get a new trade group started, the Polystyrene Recycling Alliance. And today's the day, boys. Today's the day that we are going to launch. And very excited to have you all on here to talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and really excited to have you. So I'm going to just go around the horn. I'm going to start off with Joshua Baca of Resilient Partners, who has been instrumental in helping us get this thing going. It's not technically a member, right? But doing a lot of consulting work and helping us along. If you want to introduce yourself again, you're the first repeat guest in the history of Redefining Plastics.
Well, we had a long conversation about the Global Plastics Treaty, so thank you for having me on again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Joshua Baca. I've been helping the Polystyrene Recycling Alliance get up and off the ground running, and I'm very excited for the progress that we've made to date and the work that we have ahead of us to redefine and reposition the industry going forward.
Great. And then Joe Grzyb.
Joe Grzyb, really pleased to be here. I'm Joe Grzyb. I'm the Director of Sustainability for EFP Corporation. EFP Corporation is a major supplier of molded, expanded polystyrene components for transportation and for thermal transportation.
And then our fearless leader, Richard Shaw.
Hello, Richard Shaw. I'm the Sustainability Director for America's Styrenics, otherwise known as AmSty, a leading producer in the Americas of polystyrene and styrene.
Yeah. And the executive director of our, I think that's the title, right? I get confused.
So chair of the Polystyrene Recycling Alliance for the first year here.
And we're excited about that. But I wanted to bring everybody together because it's launch day and we've put a lot of time, effort, resources into getting this thing up and running. But I want to give us a platform to talk about why we're doing it and all that good stuff. So I'm going to start with Joe. Joe, if you want to give us just a little breakdown on why EFP is joining and what you're hoping to gain out of being a member.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as I said, EFP is a major molder of expanded polystyrene components for transportation and for temperature-controlled shipments. The issue out there is that there's a lot of pressure on the EPS marketplace right now because of the perceived sustainability profile of EPS. My own personal journey, I've actually started a company that did natural fiber insulation, a company called NatureCool, and I came into the EPS marketplace as my company was purchased by EFP. Initially, I probably harbored some of those same issues about EPS. Now it's hard to recycle, blah, 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 blah. But as I got into it and as I learned more, I found out that EPS is actually very recyclable. And the perception out there is, a lot of the perceptions are largely misconstrued. We need to get the word out there, and we also need to increase the access to recycling and also the actual rate of recycling of expanded polystyrene and polystyrene. No one company can do that by itself. And so EFP Corporation is very, very pleased to be part of the Polystyrene Recycling Alliance so that we can take the power of each of our individual companies and, all be pushing on the same side of the rock to increase recycling rates and get the story out there that it's an attractive material. It has phenomenal performance characteristics and that it should go forward as a preferred solution for a number of different applications.
Yeah. And, we do a lot of work with EPSIA. I know you're a member there as well. Mm-hmm. And the numbers coming out of EPSIA for transport packaging specifically look great. And was it 31% is the number for recycle rate in the U.S.?
Yeah.
And I was talking to the head of the Norwegian and Denmark EPS associations. They're at 80%. Mm-hmm. And UNEP has already stated that EPS transport packaging is recycled at scale in many regions. So not a lot of people know that, right?
Well, and there's some tremendous success stories out there. A number of the big box stores, well, just focus for a second on appliances. A number of the big box stores out there, the lion's share of refrigerators, stoves, dishwashers, washing machines, those get delivered by the big box store or their contractor. In many cases, a lot of cases actually, all of the materials, the transportation packaging is collected. In the case of EPS, brought in, densified to make transportation more economical, and then recycled, sent right back to the manufacturer of polystyrene bead to be repurposed and reused as recycled EPS.
Yeah, and once you densify, you can get to a full truckload weight and volume, right? So
Exactly.
I think that the idea is everybody talks about how light EPS is, and that's why it's a problem. But yeah, if you can densify it, hub and spoke type system, it works really well.
Not to hog the conversation here, but just to continue that point, the strength of EPS is the same thing as the recycling weakness of EPS, which is it does a phenomenal job at whatever it wants to do, either thermal protection or protection, against vibration and shock, et cetera. It does that job with a very small amount of material. It's only about 1 pound per cubic foot. So that's phenomenal for frankly, for the environment, because you can do the job with a very small amount of material. But on the flip side, when it comes to the end of life, it creates a challenge in that you have a very large amount of material, volume-wise, with fairly small weight. And the way recycling is set up in the country right now is that the recyclers make money based on selling the materials after they're collected. And that's all based on weight. And so that creates then a challenge. And Justin, to your point, then densification is the solution there. You take the material, you put it through a compactor, essentially, you do a 50-to-1 densification. And now you have logs of material that can be palletized and put into an 18-wheeler and a full load, not 1/50th of a full load.
And there's a lot of EPS manufacturers all over the U.S., so it's not like you're going to be shipping this long distances from wherever you're collecting it. You've got somebody close that's molding EPS.
Indeed.
Yes. So Richard, you're my partner in crime here. I think it's what we've been saying for the last year, as being one of the 2 founding members of the Polystyrene Recycling Alliance, and it's been a lot of effort, right? But why don't you give the folks just a little bit of a breakdown on why AmSty decided we needed to do this and what you're hoping to gain out of it?
Sure thing. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, so well, Justin, right? Because my company, your company, who are normally competitors in the commercial space, decided to join together from an industry standpoint to drive, greater recycling and circularity of all types of polystyrene. And the reasons for that are very straightforward. First off, we have a number of customers that are asking us and are buying recycled polystyrene from us today and have been doing for several years. And that customer demand is growing. So we need to make sure that we are increasing solutions for our customers who want it. It's kind of an initial business reason, but beyond that, just from a sustainability standpoint, it's simply the right thing to do. A core tenet of sustainability is reducing waste, and what we're doing as an alliance is all about collecting all types of polystyrene, PS, XPS, EPS, and then getting it to these responsible end markets that can put it back into new consumer products. And so, one of the things that we know, but not necessarily everyone knows, is that polystyrene is essential and versatile, and it provides a lot of life-enhancing benefits to consumers around the world, whether it's medical applications, food preservation, energy conservation, personal safety products. The war on COVID was fought and won with the help of polystyrene, from petri dishes and test tubes where the virus was studied to syringes that deliver life-saving vaccines. So it's a wonderful material, but we do have an end-of-life challenge that we need to devote more effort to. We've been recycling polystyrene for several years. It's being recycled today, but we want to take it and get it to scale. And, as we started this alliance, one of the first things we did is we hired a third-party independent expert to kind of tell us where are we today. And that group is Resource Recycling Systems, RRS. And they did a study. They surveyed over 8,500 recycling programs around the country. And they came back and they gave us, kind of a starting point. And frankly, it's much better than we thought it would be. Today, 105 million Americans, or 1/3 of the population, have access to recycle one or more types of polystyrene. And several formats are on the brink of qualifying check locally claim. Means it's not yet widely recyclable, but it's also not correct to say it's not recyclable. So we're starting from a good point. It's not square one. We're already several steps down the road, and we're on a mission to get all types of polystyrene to widely recyclable status, meaning that consumers can recycle it. And then there's several milestones on this journey. We've got to help ensure that it's actually recycled. And then we have to demonstrate that this is being done at responsible end markets. And one of the things that we are learning is that a lot of materials being recycled today, but it's not highlighted. It's not visible. People keep it kind of close to the vest. Frankly, this material is a great feedstock, and some people just don't share it broadly because it's proprietary. They don't want a competitor to come in and take it from them. Well, we're going to work with members across the value chain to shine a light on it. And the other thing that's important is right now as we speak, there's an incredible transformation underway in the industry where a lot of recycling capacity is going into the ground, whether it's mechanical recycling, advanced recycling, dissolution, you name it. And we are on a journey to a much better place. And it's very important that we look at the front windshield on this journey and not the rearview mirror. Because a lot of the data points, the narrative that's out there today is based on a rearview mirror perspective. We're looking out the front windshield and we see that it's entirely possible to reach widely recyclable status by 2030.
Could not agree more with everything you just said. And I want to bring Joshua into the discussion now. Richard, I know you would say that the PSRA today would not exist without the support that we received from Joshua Baca and Resilient Partners.
Amen.
The main reason why I wanted him to come on here so I could brag on him a little bit, because he's not technically a member, but he's been instrumental in making this thing happen. And wanted to give Joshua just a little bit of time to talk about what his company's doing and then how he's supporting what we're doing through the PSRA.
Well, thank you, Justin, for those kind words. Our job has been pretty straightforward and simple. It's to make you guys, position you guys to do the good work that you want to do.
Yeah, you've got the connections, you've got the relationships, you're the one that made it all happen.
It's been a total team effort, but I appreciate that. And what I think gets me excited about the work that you're doing is really kind of three things that stand out to me. It's one, the work you're doing to highlight that your material is inherently recyclable and that it can be recycled over and over again. I think Richard just highlighted that it could be recycled via advanced recycling, dissolution, mechanical recycling. That all of the above approach strategy to me is really one of the core tenets that's going to make this group succeed. I think the second thing that gets me excited about the work that you guys are doing is it's not only this effort to increase access to recycling, which is much needed, but also to increase recycling rates. I think that's really important because there is a global movement today for sustainability, I think, as Joe mentioned, where people want to see their products recycled. They want to see more recycled content. They want to see waste out of the environment. And I think you guys have set a really good North Star journey and the work that you're doing there. And I think the third thing that gets me excited, which is really in my DNA from where I come from, is changing the misperception that your product is either problematic, unrecyclable, or unnecessary. And I think about that as really important is that we're running a campaign. I come from a campaign background. I've worked presidential campaigns and Senate campaigns and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that you're taught at a very early stage in that process is to drive a narrative. And for us to drive this narrative with proof points and data and science that the material is recyclable, that it is not problematic, that it is necessary, to me lays the foundation for the work that you guys are going to do forward or going forward. And you add that onto some of the data work science that Richard walked us through, it gives you a very clear roadmap of where you are and where you want to be. And I think very few organizations can say that today.
Where I'd like to go with this next is very similar to where you started us on the path, but most people, when they hear styrene, polystyrene, they think the trade name styrofoam or EPS or expandable polystyrene. And then they don't think much further beyond that. Obviously, our products go into a lot of different applications. EPS is great. Joe already mentioned all the great things that EPS does. We're going into refrigerator liners. We're going into, as Richard said, syringes, petri dishes, so many different things that this material does. And we're on multiple target lists, I guess is the way that you could describe it. Different organizations have marked us out to be something to be banned. Polystyrene in all of its forms, not just styrene, not just polystyrene or expanded polystyrene, anything that's made out of polystyrene is on the chopping block right now.
Yeah.
Most people, when I tell them that we're doing this, say, well, hasn't the ship already sailed on that? Haven't you guys already lost the battle? So what do you guys think? How do we change hearts and minds? How do we really get people to understand that our products are more than what they think they are and they're recyclable? I'm going to start with Joe and then we'll go around.
Yeah, I think you get the real story up there with real data with those applications that work really quite well. So I talked about transportation packaging earlier. If you're trying to move a refrigerator or a washing machine, the amount of material that you need to protect the goods using EPS, expandable polystyrene, is about 70% less than if you tried doing it with corrugate. That's a story not many people understand. And if you take those numbers and then you run an analysis on what the environmental impact is of the various packaging types, it turns out that in terms of CO2 greenhouse gas potential, the polystyrene is the better environmental choice. And we need to get that story out there. There are some folks who are pushing back. Actually, brand owners are pushing back. In 2023, March of 23, Electrolux, which is a very environmentally conscious company, put out a public statement that said that for large appliance transportation packaging, the EPS is the right environmental choice. We need to get more of those stories out there, those applications that are working well, and then build from that area of, hey, here's what the science is saying, here's what the real data is saying, how it works.
Richard?
Yeah, so I'll just build on that for a second. So as Joe pointed to, the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, has published information that highlights that EPS transport packaging is recycled at scale in certain countries and regions around the world. And he just gave the example of a recycling rate of 80%. I think it was in a Scandinavian country. So that demonstrates what's possible. And we have to come together as an alliance to help with the collection programs to help get recycling rates up to that level. And that's why I'm excited about this alliance, because we are going to make targeted investments both in infrastructure and education programs to drive greater polystyrene recycling. You say infrastructure, what does that mean? Does that mean that we need more densifiers? Does that mean we need more sortation equipment? Do we need more education to highlight what's involved with recycling polystyrene and how to do it so that we can drive much higher recycling rates? When you talk about kind of what's in it, I'm reminded that we're doing this because it's the right thing to do. It's inherently the right thing to do. And we're on a journey. I'll use that word again. And I've seen this movie once before. I've told a story, but I'll tell it. I'll tell it every chance I get. I was in the paper industry for 30 years before I came over to the plastics industry a few years ago. And before I went into the service and in college, I worked in a grocery store in high school. And I would take the boxes of consumer goods off the truck. We would take them out into the store and we'd put the canned goods and the cereal boxes up on the shelves. And then we would take those old boxes to the back of the store and we'd put them in a furnace and burn them because there was no market for them. And this was the early 1980s. Well, that changed rapidly as that industry recognized that was a valuable feedstock. They put in place infrastructure And by the time that I was in the mid 2000s and running the fiber procurement program for International Paper, we were competing with the Chinese globally for old boxes called OCC, old corrugated. It had gone from no markets to global competition within the span of roughly 15 to 20 years. We are on that same journey here. Post-use plastic, polystyrene, and other plastics are hydrocarbons. They have value. They're highly desired. And we're going to see a transformation where this material is increasingly purchased because it has value and then repurposed back into new consumer products. It's a very exciting journey to be on.
Joshua, what do you think? How do we change hearts and minds?
Well, I think to your point of the question about, have we lost the battle? The answer is no. And the reason I say that is, the data work and the science that has been done by the team shows that 105 million Americans, or a third of the U.S. population, already have access to recycle at least one polystyrene item. That's a huge milestone. Bans rarely work. We've seen it. People lack access to basic recycling today. Tons of people in the U.S. population do. So if you ban one product, all that's going to result in is another product ending up in the environment. I think what is needed here over the long term is a concerted effort to educate, using the data, using the science, using the story, showing progress, talking about to lawmakers, to stakeholders, to NGOs about some of these things over a concerted period of time is how you change hearts and minds. It's going to be driving a narrative on a regular basis. It's going to be showing progress on the data and the science that you're doing. It's going to be showing progress on the products that are inherently recyclable. It's going to also include things like showing the carbon footprint. A McKinsey study showed that polystyrene compared to other materials has a lower carbon footprint compared to alternative material. That's a good thing. And so I think when you take the sum of these activities together and you put them up in one basket, that's how you change hearts and minds over a long period of time. I totally agree with Richard. It's a journey. And I like to think about it as a baseball game. We're like in the second inning of a baseball game. There's still 7 innings of baseball left to go. And, maybe we blew out the first starting pitcher, but
we're down 14-0 already, but we got to come back in us, folks. We got to come back.
We got a deep bullpen and, with a little bit of offense, some good defense and some sound pitching, I think we'll be okay over the long term.
Could not agree more with all of that. So we're investing our own money into this thing, right? We're putting our own money. We've got a budget in place where we're going to invest to solve the problem. And I think the one thing, since I've started doing this podcast and I get challenged on a lot, is the industry is not willing to put their own money to solve these problems. And I can point to everything that we're doing and say, yes, we are. And as a group, we are going to pay money to solve the issues, and we have to. I think that's an industry-wide thing. Everybody in the industry has to get involved. We need this public-private partnerships to make these things happen. We need to work with the NGOs, the center-left NGOs, as Richard likes to say. We got to work together if we want to solve for all the issues that we talked about. And I'm really excited about it. But the one thing I like to ask everybody on this podcast, one question. Joe, what do you think of when you hear the word plastic?
A couple of different things. I think it's essential material. Okay. If you just take a look around your room, you look at the headsets that I'm wearing, et cetera. Plastics is a part of our everyday life. It's an essential material, and it's something we simply can't do without. That's one thought. The other thought is, there is a plastics waste problem. There's as much plastic waste generated worldwide as there is the total weight of the human population. That's a lot of waste. And so the plastics industry needs to roll up its sleeves and make the recycling a reality. As Richard said, used plastics is an incredibly valuable feedstock going forward. And we got to make that work. So those are the two things that come to mind. The essential material that literally we can't do without, and the other one is an issue that we all need to roll up our sleeves and fix.
Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'll tag on to that essential description that Joe mentioned. And I say that, again, from 30 years in the paper industry, At one point, I was in a food service business that made the paper cups that you get in quick service restaurants like McDonald's, Starbucks, Wendy's, you name it. And what some people may not realize is those paper cups are not just paper. The inside of the paper cup was lined with polyethylene because paper's not impervious to water. When paper gets wet, it turns to pulp. And then we had a lid that was typically made of polystyrene, sometimes polypropylene. So I've seen the intersection of paper and plastic and how they work well together in certain applications. The other thing I want to touch on is just this conversation about putting our own money into it. You're doing that. The good news is we don't have to do this by ourselves. We're going to work very broadly with a wide array of stakeholders who have common interest. And where can we amplify and supplement? And one thing exciting about this journey that we're on is if you take polystyrene might be like 5% of the packaging market. It can be kind of hard to just recycle 5% of something. But because of these transformations in recycling technology, mixed plastics are going to be increasingly desired in one basket. And so that means not just polystyrene, but polyethylene, which is the much larger resin, and polypropylene, which is a distant second. We'll get to ride along with those guys frequently. And so now you're talking about collecting 80% of the packaging market together in one basket. Becomes a lot easier, more efficient. So, that's a part of this journey that we're on. And again, very exciting to see it taking shape.
Joshua? I think I've asked you already, but might as well get your response again.
When I think about plastics, I think about it being recyclable. It's manufactured to be recyclable. It's inherently recyclable. 105 million Americans today have access to recycle at least one polystyrene item. There are breakthrough technologies coming to the market that can recycle more types and more volumes of plastic, whether on polystyrene, whether it's mechanical dissolution or advanced recycling. 3 different technologies can take that today. So when I think about the material, I think about it as recyclable. The challenge is not enough of it is recycled today. And that's where we need to focus our efforts on going forward.
Yeah, completely agree. So Richard's got a hard stop because he's got to go do the rounds on some interviews. So I want to give Richard an opportunity for any kind of closing thoughts, any other comment, things that we might have missed that you wanted to highlight.
Thank you for that. I think we've covered it fairly well here. I agree with Joshua. Our material is recyclable. It has been recycled for many years. It's being recycled today, and it's going to be recycled at much greater scale in the future. The notion that it is problematic because it's not recyclable is a false narrative. And we're going to work to demonstrate that through much greater recycling rates going forward. The notion that for whatever reason it's not fit for human consumption is also false. Polystyrene has been approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for food contact applications for decades, as have other governments around the world. It is absolutely safe. So our challenge and our mission here with this alliance is to come together and do what none of us can do individually, but we can collectively, which is to drive much greater access to recycling, much greater recycling rates, and highlight, showcase, and develop responsible in markets. So Justin, thank you for the opportunity to join you here today. And I look forward to our journey here together, okay?
Me as well. And thanks for joining. We're going to be seeing quite a bit of each other next however many years we're doing this together. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you all. Thank you, Joe.
Joe, what do you think? Any other things you wanted to cover off today that we missed?
Well, in just the kind of a recycling, the idea of recycling and the profile of what a recycling infrastructure looks like. As I said earlier, I'm a DPS guy, so the collection and densification and then transportation to the site of where recycling is going to be taking place. That's where we really need to do the work. It's interesting, though, if you take a look from that point forward to get from the material showing up to the doorstep of the recycler to the consumer as new material, that process in EPS is really quite straightforward and quite clean. It's a mechanical process that really only requires heat and electricity to take the material, regrind it up, melted, clean up the melt, and then re-extrude polystyrene bead, which then turns into expanded polystyrene molded components. If you compare that to some of the other materials, say corrugate, which is one of the main targets for redesign of packaging into corrugate, paper recycling is a rather nasty process. It generates about 25% of the air pollution, about 60% of the water pollution as virgin paper. And pound for pound, there's no other commercial material out there that uses more water per pound of production than paper. So the getting that story out there as well, that there's a difference on the back end in the environmental profile of recycling polystyrene is really quite attractive relative to some other materials. I think that's an important part of the story that we need to get out there.
Agreed there. Joshua, anything else from your perspective that we missed?
I would just build a little bit upon what Joe mentioned, which is let's not forget the environmental impact story here when it comes from a climate perspective. I highlighted a little bit earlier, a McKinsey and Company study showed that all plastics, including polystyrene, have a lower carbon footprint compared to alternatives like paper, glass, metal. And, there's a movement here to also address climate and sustainability goals. So we should make sure that we don't lose sight of that narrative as well, too.
From my perspective, the one thing I wanted to mention is if you are involved, anybody who's listening, if you're involved in the polystyrene industry in any way, shape, or form, and you are concerned about the future of polystyrene, come join us. We'd love to have more people join. We've got 13 founding members as of right now. We'd like to double that, triple that, quadruple that over the next couple of years because we need to make a bigger impact. The more people that we have join, the more impact we can have. So if you're interested or would just like to learn more, there's psrecycling.org is our website, or you can reach out to any one of us on this call. I'll have all of our contact information in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get in touch. But gentlemen, I'm really excited. A lot of hard work has gone into this. Polystyrene is, as we discussed, unfairly marginalized, and we are going to do our damnedest to make sure that changes. And I think with the energy and the expertise of this group that we have put together right now, we're really going to make a difference. And I'm really pumped about how this thing's going to shake out. But with all that said, this has been the Redefining Plastics podcast, part of Brave Media. My name is Justin Riney. Really appreciate Joshua, Richard, and Joe for joining today in the Polystyrene Recycling Alliance. And for those that are listening, thanks so much and have a great day.